Prime Minister Narendra Modi has returned from a week-long trip to the US where he met President Donald Trump not once but twice, reconfirming that the US remains India's most important international partner. There has been wall-to-wall coverage of his visit, especially of the Houston leg, when Trump flew into Texas to participate in the Howdy Modi event with the Prime Minister. Perhaps, in his wildest dreams, the American president would not have imagined the resounding and repeated ovations reserved for Modi by the 59,000-strong Indian-American community in his own country. The incredible function in Houston seemed to have redefined the India-US relationship. But as the applause subsides and the Prime Minister returns to the nitty-gritty of issues back home, several questions emerge. What exactly is the state of the India-US relationship, shorn of the fulsome and diplomatic turn of phrase? Do Modi and Trump, India and the US really trust each other? Are they natural allies? As former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee once put it, strategic partners or just good friends? And in the wake of Modi's reaffirmation of the Trump's politics through the Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar slogan, has India abandoned its non-partisan approach to foreign policy? The Print takes you behind the scenes and brings you the inside story. On the eve of Modi's visit to the US, External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar described the India-US relationship as being in a very good health, adding that he was very optimistic about its present and future. Both Modi and Trump had met on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Biarritz, France, barely a month before, on August 26th, where they exhibited a unique bonhomie. Less than 3 weeks before the Biarritz meeting, the Modi government had changed the status of Jammu and Kashmir by abrogating Article 370, bifurcating the state and converting them into union territories. But both leaders preferred to publicly speak about boosting bilateral trade and investments, signaling the possibility of a trade deal. Their meeting in the US seemed pregnant with several possibilities. So as Modi arrived in Houston on September 21st, his first engagement was with CEOs from over 16 US energy companies in the oil and gas sector. It was a good start to the week. That evening in Houston, Indian energy company Petronet signed an agreement with the US energy company Tellurian, committing an investment of $2.5 billion in the US with the promise of generating 50,000 jobs. Despite the euphoria at the Howdy Modi event at the NRG Stadium that would follow, US companies preferred to hang on to their checkbooks. Much has been said about Modi's public support for Trump at the Howdy Modi event. Several people have asked why Prime Minister needed to wade into America's domestic politics with his Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar slogan, especially when the US House of Representatives Democratic leader Steny Hoyer was on stage and brought compliments from the powerful speaker Nancy Pelosi. Then came Modi's second leg of the US visit, New York. Although the primary objective to visit the Big Apple was to address the UN General Assembly, Modi reached there 5 days before he was to speak. The most important item on his agenda was to meet President Trump, this time more formally in a bilateral setting. The Modi-Trump encounter took place on September 24th, but contrary to expectations, there were no announcement of a trade deal. Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale stated there had been significant progress and India had been firm about access about US markets. Trump said a smaller trade deal was in the works, followed by a larger deal, indicating that a US-India free trade agreement was still on the cards. Turned out that Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal had flown in directly from Dubai to iron out last-minute glitches on a proposed trade deal with his counterpart, US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. But despite several back-and-forth meetings, the deal remained elusive. Until today, there seems no breakthrough on the horizon. Not surprisingly, recently at a business summit, Goyal said US and India share a torrid love affair. US is now hell-bent on India relaxing its policies on e-commerce that has made life a tad more difficult for American retail giants operating here. On the issue of foreign direct investment, US wants easing of norms on multi-brand retail trade. In New York, the diplomatic blitz continued. Modi met as many as 40 top American conglomerates, delivered a speech at the Bloomberg Global Business Forum, and was awarded the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Goalkeeper Award for the path-breaking work his government has done on the sanitation front. Jaishankar visited several influential think tanks, and even when Modi left US, kept a relentless pace, meeting US Secretary Mike Pompeo and other senior officials of the Trump administration. Modi and Jaishankar emphasized the similarities between the world's oldest and largest democracies and how India was open for business. India remained one of the world's most attractive destinations, Modi insisted, but the American corporate world remained unfazed and untouched. No agreements were signed. Beyond platitudes, there were no verbal commitments from any major CEO. The K-word Kashmir, the subject of many a diplomatic battle across the 90s, soon after the Pakistan-sponsored insurgency first spread its tentacles across the valley, especially in the wake of the demolition of the Babri Masjid in 1992, echoed across New York last month too. It was bound to after the August 5th abrogation of Article 370, which gave Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan the excuse as well as the opportunity to unleash a diplomatic blitz abroad. Only a month ago, when Khan had gone to the US on a bilateral visit with his army chief and ISI chief in tow and stood next to Donald Trump in the White House, Trump had offered to mediate between India and Pakistan on Kashmir. Delhi was ashen-faced.
If you would want me to mediate or arbitrate, I would be willing to do that.
What Delhi did not explain was that if the Indo-US relationship was in such a healthy shape, why did Trump have to bow to Pakistani blackmail? Last week in the US, the change in Trump's demeanor was changed again. Twice he offered to mediate between India and Pakistan over Kashmir, but both times added the caveat only if both leaders agreed to do so. In his inimitable way, Trump told a news conference that the leaders of nuclear India and Pakistan were good friends of mine and that he had told them to just work it out. Times Square in the heart of New York, among the most expensive advertising real estate in the world, was lit up in red with free Kashmir ads, while protests against Modi in Houston followed him outside UN General Assembly in New York. A day before Modi left the US on September 26th, the State Department's Acting Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, Alice Wells, said that the Modi camp had explained its motivations in abrogating Article 370 and laid out a plan for Kashmir's future. She pointed out that the political leadership was largely under arrest and that the US hoped that India would take rapid actions in lifting the restrictions from the valley, hold elections there at the earliest opportunity, and release leaders from detention. Perhaps Delhi's biggest understanding of Trump in recent times has been his overweening interest in trade and economic affairs. The US president believes that the world has taken America for a ride for far too long, and while China tops that list, India also figures on it. Trump has called India a tariff king, harped on the fact that India had imposed 100% import tariffs on that blue-blooded American icon, the Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Fact is, two-way trade between India and the US is touching $142 billion today, with $24 billion in India's favor. Trump soon grew obsessed with the idea of addressing the trade deficit. By 2018, it had taken center stage in the relationship. But as India raised import duties instead of cutting them in its last two budgets, the frost between Delhi and Washington set in. Even after Delhi cut tariffs on the Harley-Davidson bikes by half, trade arguments over the cost of American medical devices, steel and aluminum, and smartphones began to dominate the conversation. While India, in the throes of an election campaign fought by Modi on the plank of nationalism and an end to Pakistani terror, few noticed that the Trump administration was contemplating strong retaliatory action against India's trade policy. So no sooner did Narendra Modi was sworn into power did Washington revoke the Generalized System of Preferences or GSP, affecting duty-free access to Indian exports amounting to around $6.4 billion. India retaliated by imposing even higher tariffs on 28 US products. During Modi's US visit last month, the Americans gave no assurance it would reinstate the GSP, nor did it offer a waiver on Section 232 tariffs applied on Indian steel and aluminium entering the US. For the first time, though, 4 foreign ministers of the Quad nations, India, Australia, Japan, and the US, met on the margins of the UNGA. The Pacific Ocean touches 3 of the 4 countries, while India has an ocean named after it. On September 26, while Modi was still touring the US, the Indian, US, and Japanese navies came together to carry out the Malabar 2019 maritime exercises in the Pacific Ocean. Another manifestation of that eye on China is the 2+2 India-US Defense plus Foreign Ministers dialogue that was held for the first time last year. A second ministerial dialogue has been somewhat delayed this year, but India realizes it needs the strength of the US Defense Forces to stiffen its spine vis-a-vis China. The US has lately become India's 3rd largest arms supplier, with defense trade touching $18 billion in 2018. Significantly, India has remained determined to buy the Russian S-400 air defense system despite Trump's threat to invoke the sanctions against the countries doing defense deals with Moscow. So as US and India form new relationships in an increasingly multipolar world, the US with Pakistan, India with Russia, both nations are bound to rub against each other. And then there is China, faced with its relentless rise in every nook and corner. Perhaps both need each other more than they realize.